Thank you all for joining us today for a learning and growing webinar, Successful Elements of Online Design from the Student and Professor Perspective. Our presenter today is Dr. Stephanie Schaefer, and my name is Faith Bryan, and I'm a member of the training and sales team here at Hawks Learning. We will have a live Q&A session after the presentation, so please feel free to enter any questions into the Q&A as we go. And for now, I will hand it over to Dr. Schaefer. You are currently muted, by the way.
That's always the way, isn't it?
Perfect.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Faith. Yes. So today I'll be speaking about successful elements of online design from the student and professor perspective. And it really comes from the idea that I have been both a student in the online setting as well as a professor in the online setting. When I started undergraduate, that's when online education started to really come into play more. I started taking a couple of online classes when I was in undergraduate education. And then I took, again, a couple of classes here and there in the graduate when I was doing my master's degree program. I then took a completely online certificate program from Drexel University in teaching English to students of other languages. And that really excited me to be able to do more online classes. I did my entire PhD program online through University of Buffalo, and I really enjoyed having that ability to take my classes online. It was something that definitely encouraged me in the future to do that, to work in the online setting. I started out teaching as an adjunct in English and started to incorporate some online course materials in that class. And then when I first looked for a job in the K through 12 sector, I actually worked in an online school. And then I went back to brick and mortar, what they call brick and mortar in the traditional in-person setting. And then now I currently work as an online professor. And I think that the experience that I had as a student online prior to me being a professor online really impacted the way that I design and look at coursework. So that's basically what the flow is going to be today. I'm going to talk about me as a student in the online setting, the observations that I had and why I decided to go online. Then I'm going to talk about that shared space, that place that the education occurs, whether that's in a learning management system or in a Zoom call like what we're in right now. And then I'm going to talk about how that has affected the way that I present courses and how I design courses in the future, and how I now teach different teachers from across the country how to improve their online course delivery. So first of all, I'm going to consider the student perspective and think about what were my initial reactions and why I decided to go into taking classes online to begin with. So why I chose to be online had to do partially with the idea that I just loved being on the computer. I enjoyed being able to learn different ideas on the computer. I saw it as playing different online games. I enjoyed seeing, different ways that I could, practice something over and over. And it was very interesting to me. I also like the ability to work more independently, which is something that as a student, I was able to do when I was online. I was able to practice different ideas and do that basically by myself. I enjoyed that type of learning. Even when I was a student, in the younger grades, I enjoyed taking out a book and reading a book and understanding the material by myself. So that was something also that drew me to online learning. I also really appreciated, especially when I went into my PhD program, the flexibility of access. So when I was looking at different PhD programs, I really was drawn to the University of Buffalo's program because I would be able to access this course whenever I could. I was working currently in that time period as a teacher as well. So being able to access the lectures and access the assignments on weekends and at nights was when I wanted to access my course materials. And that's why being online seemed to work better for me. I was able to take the information I was learning in my PhD program and go right into the classroom and try it out and see if it was something that I felt was effective as a teacher. And then also, I decided to choose online as a student because I like the ability to look at my course material over the course of the day and over the course of the week. I like to be able to see what I did in the first discussion board and how I did on that first discussion board, and have that dialogue with that teacher and be able to revisit that dialogue with that teacher throughout the entire semester. And that helped me to measure my own growth. So then when I thought about these initial reactions to why I decided to choose online learning, it really came to the idea of two main ideas. The idea that I had the tech access and fluency necessary to be an online student. I was able to go into the course and revisit that course content. I was able to navigate through the course successfully. If it was in a learning management system, I was able to look and see where that course was, where were the different folders and where were the different assignments. I already had a lot of that technology fluency there. So that was one of the reasons why, you could see overall that I was, successful as an online learner. The other reason why it seemed like I was successful as an online learner was that idea of self-regulation. So I was able to be self-directed in the way that I would understand content, and I would be already interested in measuring my own growth. So these two main components are definitely what's also reflected in the research. So one of the things I would be remiss not to talk about is the idea of technology access. Students that have access to technology and access to the internet are going to be have that more of an ability to be able to access your course. We have to realize that, there's different studies. Gonzalez in 2020 said there was about 20% of our higher education students without access. The Institute of Higher Education Policy, their 2019 report also mentioned about 24% of students sometimes not having reliable access to broadband, and 4% definitely never having reliable access. So that definitely can affect the interest of students being able to access the course. Also, when we think about access, we also think about things like what types of devices can the student use to be able to access the course. Right now, I'm presenting on a computer and a laptop, but if somebody is using a Chromebook or using a cell phone or using a tablet, all of those things can change the way that the student accesses the course and how successful they'll be in the future with their access. So those are definitely different parts of the research that we have to think about when we're designing our online courses. Is, can our students actually access the course? Meaning, can they get on the internet to be able to be on the Zoom call with us? Or are they trying to use a cell phone, or are they trying to use a tablet device in order to do that? So different types of synchronous delivery is going to depend on the types of devices that our students are able to use. Another big part of this is also the idea of technology fluency. And technology fluency can be quite broad in some ways, but I considered it as the ability of having that comfort of being online and being able to navigate correctly to the learning management system, and that type of idea of fluency. As you can see, in 2003 and 2004, both of these researchers mentioned that comfort of being online is such an important component, like that ability to, navigate correctly to the websites, that ability to hand in assignments correctly, that ability to access your presentation materials. Those are all important parts. But as we can see in EDUCAUSE's 2019 report, there's still that's still mentioned in the research even today, that there's a technology fluency component, that we have to think about how students can connect with, being able to just navigate through the course is still an important component of having an online course program. So then we can also look at the idea of self-regulation and motivation and those types of social emotional components of learning. We're thinking about stuff like readiness and the identity for online learning. We're thinking about the idea that students can feel like they're ready to take the course in terms of their goal setting and their own motivational strategies. Are they able to have the time management? Are they able to, so all these components of like time management, ability to set goals for themselves, the ability to know when assignments are due, all of those are indicators for success in online environments. So, Huang in 2021 just recently created a system where the self-regulation strategies are embedded into the course. So there's already opportunities for goal setting, opportunities for students to reflect on their learning. And they found that there was increased academic motivation and achievement in high school math when there was that built-in areas for goal setting. So then once I go from being the student and thinking about that as a student, I felt success from the ability to self-regulate as well as the ability to have that technology fluency. Then I kind of when I started thinking about the process, then I started to think about the actual materials, that shared space that we create with our students when they're in online learning environments. So the shared space is the place where the instructional community connects. And when we can think of this, we can think of this as a learning management system. We can think of this as video conferencing. We can think of this as that collection of all of those materials that the instructor and the student are connecting with. And that place needs to be built in a way that's effective for students, but also is effective for instructors. Being somebody that was already a student in the online setting, I had the really fortunate opportunity to see a very large variation in online course design. I was able to see, the very beginnings before really a lot of the video instruction may have been embedded in classrooms where it was more just really text dependent. I was able to see how that shared space has transformed. When I first started taking online courses, I mean, this idea that I would have about 50 people online right now being able to watch me, this was not necessarily part of that shared space. So that shared space has evolved over time. But two of the main components of shared spaces that I see are learning management systems and video conferencing. So in that shared space, we can think of two different major elements. We can think of the presentation of materials, and we can think of that feedback loop that occurs within the shared space. So we can think of how materials are housed, where they're housed, where students can go back for reference of different materials. And we can also think about that other component that's continuously evolving, that communication of ideas that is given not only through, it's given through feedback, but it's also given through, emails and comments, both formative and summative feedback that we're providing to our students. So when we're thinking about the presentation of materials, from my experience as a student and now also as an instructor, having that backwards design, as Martin 2019 discussed, and backwards design, of course, has been discussed by many different researchers, the ability to take that, what is our main goal? and what are we going to, what do we want our students to accomplish by the end of the semester, and then just starting to build that. So one of the ways that we do that is we think of, we may have in our university or in our high school setting, we may have a overall end objective or set of objectives, and then we start to design from that. And when we design that, we start to think about then, okay, this is our main idea that we want to have across for this unit. Then we start to go backwards and we start to say, okay, these are the modules and different information that's necessary to achieve that goal. And one of the websites that can also help with this is CAS 2021 UDL on campus website discusses a lot of those elements, what you would want to do for a universal design for learning. So you would like to look at the effective organization and presentation for materials for all students. So you might have like your syllabus on there, your learning goals and assessments, all of those components, and what would be great that gives you more feedback on what specifically you can do in order to make it more universally designed. And what I mean by universally designed, I mean that students that have disabilities or students that are English language learners would be able to look at your website and be able to access it effectively. So another component other than the presentation of materials is communication. And I think communication is such an important part, not only for students, but for faculty members as well. The ability to have those two streams of communication that are occurring during the course, one of which is real-time communication through that synchronous modality, and also somewhat through the asynchronous modality as well. And that's through emails, chats, and Zooms. That I think that as a student, thinking of the real-time communication as a student, I always felt great when I was able to send an email out to professors, and within a couple of hours during their normal working hours, they were able to respond to me. I think that validated my ideas and made me feel more motivated to be able to complete the course. And I think it was also about the professor, coming from the professor's perspective, the professor kind of giving an idea to students of when those working hours were and when they are more responsive to emails. I think that helps in terms of students being able to successfully complete the course when there's that ability for emails and Zoom set up in the course already. Communication, though, is continuously going on through distributed means as well, on demand. So students will receive communication about assignments and their feedback, as well as through general course announcements. And even emails could be also considered under that distributed place where, it occurs, but it's not always exactly immediately after. So those are the two types of things. So I got a quick Q&A, and this is when I'm going to interrupt myself because I like answering them when we're going. So how about when students expect you to be available all the time, sending you emails during weekends and quite late in the evening, and still expecting a reply in a short time? And that's why I said what would be a really great tool would be to tell students when you're most available, and having also opportunities for Zooms or for video conferencing at a certain time. Having those live office hours can help. And then also thinking about when would your students be most available, when are they going to be accessing this course material, kind of thinking about that, and thinking about, is there any way that you can, within your schedule, have a little bit of flexibility to be able to answer during that time period. So I noticed that within my own courses that I teach online, that Monday in the afternoon seems to be a hot time for questions. And I noticed that, like, I tend to get questions also on that Sunday. So I try to make myself available during those times. But again, communicating effectively about what times, thinking about when are your assignments due. So if you're not interested, this is a good thing to say. If you're not interested necessarily in Sunday contact time, you may want to think about when are you having those assignments be due, and then do it that way. So what I would do with my writing course that I've taught online is I decided to have that assignment due on like Thursday or Friday. Thursday or Friday allowed me to, kind of eliminate that weekend content a little bit. If I have the module open on Monday and the module kind of closes on that Friday, then I tend to not have the weekend content time as much. However, it depends on your schedule and it depends on all of that. So that was a great question, but I'm going to continue on with communication and feedback. Thank you for that. Because it's a good thing to say, sometimes your own overall design can affect the times in which students contact you. So if you tell students like, hey, I'm available at this time, I'm usually available from 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, and maybe have one night or so that you can contact students, and if you can ever flex your schedule a little bit, that can also help as well. Okay. So again, when we're thinking about that, when we have discussion forums and the ability for students to communicate with one another, we also have that ability for more students to be able to have that uninterrupted conversation. So they're able to explain their ideas more. And that's a great skill in terms of the current working world that we live in, with all of the business communication, with emails and all of that. It also, online courses, it allows people that may not have spoke up in your class to speak up and to share content and ideas. Gives more opportunities for students to participate. But at the same time, when we're doing that, we also have to consider our student pacing as well. So that means when we first have an online course, it takes a bit to understand the pacing. I think after a couple iterations of it, you start to see, again, when do students tend to email me? When do students tend to ask questions about the assignments? And then we can create it so that we're not speeding completely through the curriculum, but we're taking it at a time that seems to be manageable for our students, and have that ability also, I think, for timely feedback. So that's the thing, is, as Sophia just mentioned, our students, when they see that it takes us, there has to be kind of an agreement there that they know when you're available and can then contact you and communicate with you. And usually in the online settings that I've worked for, they tend to recommend anywhere, depending on the length of assignments, anywhere from 72 hours to 96 hours for an assignment to get feedback back, which can be different than maybe in our, brick and mortar setting. We may, have a little bit more time to work on something. So that can also affect your design. You may want to think about, can I get feedback reasonably to these students in a week with the assignment that I designed? And if the answer is no, then you might want to think about how I could break up this assignment into multiple parts so that I am able to give them that feedback. Some of the more successful courses that I've taught also have a model where the student may be working on one big assignment, but it's broken down in smaller manageable chunks so that you're able to give them that feedback and have that feedback loop start early versus having the feedback all come in at the very end, because that can be often really overwhelming for students as well. So then taking all of this into account has really affected the way that I present course materials and how I train people to present course materials. That's what it's done as a professor. And when I look at those key elements that I was mentioning before, the ideas of technology fluency, opportunities to promote self-regulation, presentation of materials and communication, this is kind of what I've taken from the research and from the information from being a student, and how I've kind of made sense of all of that together. So technology fluency, I have learned from teaching online, is like your number one priority right in the beginning, is to make sure that students can log on. Actually, when I teach in an in-person setting and I use a learning management system, that is like day one what I do. Other than the syllabus and kind of an understanding of where we're going, I really make sure everybody has an ability to log in. Everybody has the ability to know where the labs are on campus for taking, for handing in things. When I teach in person, I actually teach in a computer lab, which is very beneficial as well, because then I can go through how to access Blackboard, and I can go step by step, and they can practice a discussion board, and they can practice an assignment, and they can practice how to navigate through the course right there with me. And that's been an essential part. And I also, when I've taught online in the synchronous setting like I am right now, presenting my screen, but also having those practice elements in the beginning of the class to ensure everybody can get on Blackboard or Canvas or D2L. Everybody can do the very basics of it. I also include short videos of accessing the course so that they can refer back to it. I usually post that in my discussion, in my initial announcement, so that the initial announcements emails to all students. That way, if it's before a synchronous session and they don't know how to access Zoom, if that email sends out to them to their preferred email, then they can look at that video and hopefully understand how to download things, so that they're able to get going day one. I also create PDFs, short PDFs, screenshots, also in that initial announcement, so that students, again, can know how to navigate through the course and be able to do that. I also have I also really assign something like an introduction discussion board right away to see, can students post a discussion post to me? And if I don't see anything from them, that is when I set up one-on-one outreach, or I make a connection. We also have, at the different schools that I work at, there's often somebody there who does technology. So I do a nice little gentle handoff to that person that does technology as additional outreach. So that is definitely something that I do with technology fluency. And I'll just stop right now and see if anybody has any questions concerning technology fluency, or ideas. If you want to post any ideas in the Q&A, that would also be helpful to everybody. But I'll just stop right here just to kind of go through each of these elements and have some more time for some interaction here. Okay, how about when your classes are very large, like 200 students? That definitely has occurred as well. And then Kathleen also has one. So I'll start off with Sophia. When my classes have been very large with 200 students, that role has usually been shared with counseling. Like they usually have a counselor or somebody connecting in with them. But again, I think that these strategies of trying to see if you can get everybody to log into something would be helpful. You may also want to do something like a poll in your learning management system. If you don't want to do a discussion forum, if you want to just start out with like a poll, then you can see, which people have not responded yet to your poll, so that you can start to see who might be those students that are having trouble with technology access, and then being able to direct them to technology services right in the beginning. So If the school already has how-to videos, do you still make your own? Yes and no. If they're available on YouTube, there's a really great resource called Edpuzzle. So if you've never used Edpuzzle before, I'll show you it. Yep. Edpuzzle is a website where you can like crop down videos and add in questions and add in different places for like redirection. So that might be useful as well. You can also do that in Google Slides as well, where you can narrow, like you can condense a video. I just personally, from my own perspective, I never have the attention span to sit through a 20-minute video. Like if you're right now watching this webinar and another time, like, and you got to this point, you should get a sticker, because like for me, I can't focus for that long. But you know, I've noticed that the shorter the video, like that's why TikTok is so, you know, why people love TikTok. People love TikTok because it's short and they can see where to go. So if you can condense it down to a couple of minutes on it, you're going to more likely have students accessing that video. And if you have something like Edpuzzle, it will also stop the video at certain times and can give additional feedback. Sure. Edpuzzle. Does Edpuzzle integrate well or easily with Canvas Studio? That's a good question, Rebecca. I would have to look that up. I think so. I mean, you could use it. You could probably put it in Canvas as an external link. I'm not exactly sure though if it will, you know, there's some of those websites can just like it reads, you know, it like brings in the answers. I think it does though. I'm pretty sure that when I've used Edpuzzle in the past, I haven't used it with Canvas, but it will like give the grade back to you know, the other site. Yes, okay. ISB's, our institution, really wants us to house all videos in Studio, so that's fine too. What you can do is you could, oh, in Canvas Studio, like the recording studio. I'm not totally sure. I'm not totally sure. I know in Canvas itself, you may be able to add it as an assignment pretty easily, but I'm not totally sure how it does in terms of Canvas Studio. That'd be a good question to answer. You know, I don't know the answer to that exactly. But okay. I don't think anybody else has any questions so far about technology, so I'll move on to the next part. So then the next part will be self-regulation strategies. So when I create announcements, again, this is, you know, part of my research outside of this is looking at mathematics assessments and looking at how to reduce cognitive load for students and how to create more experiences where students can understand what they're seeing and be able to bring all of that together. So in terms of an announcement, I think about announcements as being very friendly and motivational. I usually include some sort of image that's motivational to my students. I also include, you know, I can include information from the course, but I think one of the ways to promote self-regulation strategies is to create announcements that really, in your course, you know, every week, create some sort of announcement that has information about what's due in the week, some information about what are effective online learning tips, give them an idea of something that they can do, like a new app that they could download to help them organize. You could have a link to a YouTube video that talks about like how to use like Google Calendar to assign tasks for them. I also talk about, I have it right next to me, my paper planner. I have a paper planner that I use. I always talk about that with students that, you know, I use paper planning. I try to include that within my weekly announcement. I also try to highlight important parts of assignments that students may not necessarily see. That helps with self-regulation, because if they don't understand that, they'll read through my announcement and I'll say, if this, this is the general idea of what the assignment is for this week. This is the general idea of what the discussion board, and then I have content tag methods. So I have an email, and I usually have an office hour, and I have a, I say, I'm usually available between, 9 to 5 for this course, and I try to tell them, if they have any questions, that they're more than welcome, to do that. Infographics is amazing. Infographics is a great idea, Amy. So, try it again. I consolidate this. You can see that I already am a bullet point kind of person. So I try to do something where it's like, welcome to the class, some motivation, a tip for the week, what assignment 1 is, what's assignment 2, here's how you contact me. So an infographic is another great way. The only thing I would say is that make sure if you have an infographic that you also have some sort of text description. So you can do that either sometimes it depends on what system you're using. You could do some sort of alternative text to your infographic, just in case you do get somebody who is blind in your class who is unable to access maybe the picture. But I love the idea of an infographic. Absolutely. I think that's a great idea. Any way that you can have multiple representations of the information, I think is really great. And then Dr. Bolin, yes, you'll be able to access the recording later. And Alan says, I teach math on Zoom. I use a document camera with a sheet of paper, a Sharpie to draw diagrams. Zoom whiteboard, mouse is terrible substitute. Agreed for that. Any suggestions for a text tool for better writing on a whiteboard? I have one next to me. I do have something. I've used an iPad with a Logitech crayon. That seems to work. But I will tell you that honestly, I am there with you with the doc cam and the sheet of paper. I feel that is much easier to use. I also have done the doc cam with the whiteboard and the marker. In terms of like using like an Apple Pencil or that on on an iPad or on like, trying to think of some of the there's other ones out there too that you can use to write on. I tend to really, I don't know. I like the feeling of paper and pencil. So when I'm doing math, I tend to do that. In terms of other tools though, that like for your students to use, you could also use something might be useful as like Desmos or Nearpod. I'd highly suggest. Desmos or Nearpod might be some tools that if you're doing a synchronous class and you want to see everybody's work at the same time, that would be a way to do it. So synchronous meaning everybody's logged in like on the Zoom. I could set up a Nearpod and then everyone would be able to write at the same time. Again, the more, it seems like for shorter things, stylus, on a text surface is nice. I agree. I kind of still tend to use the doc cam and the Apple Pencil. Yep. So John says that Wacom tablet is what I was thinking of. Thank you, Anonymous. So Wacom tablet is another one that you could invest in. Yep. And then Sophia said, how to create a sentence for students to use Canvas discussion board to share their questions and assignments. That is a difficult one. Yes. They say typically they want us to send us individual emails when classes are very large and also when the questions they all have are very similar. I mean, in terms of your design, I don't know how much you would be against this, but you could do something where it's like, I don't know, there's some sort of like a lower stakes assignment that you could have it as an assignment. I mean, you could do where it's not going to be obviously weighted at the weight of a test or a quiz. Maybe it would be at the end of the semester. Maybe you could make it so it's like a weight of a quiz, but like a weekly discussion post might be helpful too. Because then what they can do, the students can do, is they can kind of connect and answer questions from their other classmates as well. You could create a discussion forum with already topics that you already think that students may struggle in as well. You could create a discussion forum where it's like that, but I'm going to tell you that putting some points behind that may help students to feel connected. It's obvious that, you know, it can be very challenging for students to feel like, asking questions in front of their peers in general. So maybe something like that can help, that you kind of have a discussion forum. You might also be able to do something, again, like using polling software, like some sort of poll you could do as well with different components of the project to see if that's it. Another thing you could do, you might like, is Padlet. Padlet might be something you may be able to use. Let me go ahead and move it. So Padlet, and Nearpod also has this functionality where what you can do is you can have a Padlet, and then students can add comments to that, and then you can they can like and dislike comments as well. So sometimes maybe the way the discussion forum looks can be kind of ominous in a way. So this, as well as discussion boards or discussions through Nearpod, has this ability where people can like and dislike, and you can answer questions all in one spot. Sure. So the first one is going to be Padlet, Padlet. I'm trying to type that up there, Padlet. And Nearpod. Those may be two places that you might want to experiment with. Nearpod is basically, I could take that Google Slides and make it more interactive. Yeah. I know, Sophie, I agree. We're trying to give them points, what they should be doing, but it's one of those things where it's, if you do it in a low stakes way, like you're not, there's always that argument. Should you give points for participation? Should you not give points for participation? That's the great educational debate. If it helps them to become more self-regulated in the future in other courses, then you might want to consider it. Because if it leads them down a road where you have them in a class in their junior and senior year, and they're more willing to ask questions to a whole group, I mean, you might be able to do that in an earlier course, and hopefully that confidence in themselves to ask questions to an entire group would develop. So that's, Padlet is another way to do that, kind of low stakes, and then it's anonymous. The Padlet would be anonymous as well, so that might be helpful. All right, going to the last two, the presentation of materials. Again, what definitely needs to be done in this course to meet the course objectives. What do I need? And that takes a revisualization of different types of assignments that you might do. A traditional quiz or test may not translate very well to the typical online environment, and you should think about that. If students can find the answers, all the answers to the multiple choice questions, is that an effective method of assessment? Or is there something else that you could do that's like more authentic to your area of study? Or is it really that you have to go to that traditional method? Like, let's say you're teaching an intro to biology course, and you need them to know these material, this stuff without the internet. So you're going to have to create something where you have exam proctors or people watching. So again, I suggest planning the course out, having pretty much the outline there and the framework, and then filling it in with that additional information that you think would be useful for your students with disabilities and your students that are ESOL, I think is really important in terms of presentation. So start out with thinking of your skeleton and then just kind of building in the muscles and all of those components to your body of the course. So start out with thinking about that. Yeah, mix in a few essay questions, right? Or have them create a presentation like I'm doing in Google Docs, or have them create a short video. There's also sites like that right now. Flipgrid is one of them. Flipgrid is a website where they can create short form videos. So that might be a useful way of presenting material. So, having multiple ways that they can show their learning is also a research-based and highly effective teaching practice. If you can have students presenting their material in multiple ways, I mean, most traditional classes will do that. They'll have some quizzes, they'll have some tests, they may have a paper, may have a presentation. It gives you more of a holistic look of what that student actually, understands. So, I try to build the skeleton first and then fill in the gaps of what I feel like students would need in terms of additional material to help them. And a lot of that comes in from announcements, clarifying discussion posts, and also just, additional ways of even showing feedback through video, showing feedback through rubrics, showing feedback through a wide variety of different methods. So how do you rubric for multiple videos and multiple work types? Again, you're thinking about, like, if you decide to do something where you have like a menu where they have a wide variety of different ways that they can present material, I would, kind of create a rubric that assesses more of the content and what specific things you wanted them to cover, and maybe have one area of the rubric where you talk about the overall design and delivery of it, but the majority of the rubric, just like in terms of any project, if you're a math teacher or you're an English teacher, you're going to be assessing your content standards first. The delivery is there, the grammar, the citations, those parts are there, a part of the rubric. But then I would really think about, what are my objectives, and did they answer the questions that I wanted to get from those specific objectives? So that's definitely something that I do when I rubric. So when I create a rubric, I think of my objectives. I think of what areas specifically do I want in terms of those objectives. And then I also have some components where I say, just in general, how was the delivery of this and all of that? How is it did it have appropriate grammar, mostly appropriate grammar and structure? And finally, did they appropriately cite? And then last time, the last kind of area here is communication in terms of emails and also in terms of feedback. So I'll start out with emails. Emails, you gotta love emails. I try to really make sure my emails are pretty short, and that helps so that the student doesn't get lost in them. I feel like if the email requires more than a paragraph, probably calling them would be better. It just seems like it's just too much information within the email, and then they misinterpret part of it, and then it eventually just leads to a phone call or a video call anyways. So I just say to them, I try to answer their question. If I can answer it pretty reasonably within a paragraph, I send it as email. If it feels like it's going to be much longer and much more detailed, I actually create the email, but then also call them. So then I have a call and an email that they kind of can cross-reference what they heard on the phone and what I wrote in email. It just seems to facilitate it and make me a lot less stressed. In terms of emails, you know, if you have a student that's constantly going back and forth, I tend to say if it's like more than twice, that's when I start to say, do you just want to talk to me? Like, let's just call each other and like, we'll figure it out. So if it seems to be like it's constantly going back and forth and they ask one question and they ask another question, they ask another question, that's what I tend to do, is I just do it that way. And then in terms of feedback and assignments, again, I try to break it down to a strengths, areas of growth, and a communication. In terms of rubrics, I like to give comments. Either I give comments throughout the body of the paper in inline grading, where I just make a comment, each of those, or I use the rubric. So it's either or. I don't try to do all three. There's 3 areas that you could really do with like a, let's say a paper. You have like you can draw comments on it. You can, you know, go into the rubric areas, or you can give generalist comments. Usually I either pick one of either the inline where I'm marking comments down, or if the rubric has an area for it, I do that. And then I try to make a summarization of all of those comments in the general feedback area. And in those 3 areas, I look for specifically, you know, areas, you know, communication loop. I'm just trying to see if there's something else. How do you motivate students to read your emails and announcements? I mean, I try to put, when I have like those additional elements outside of the course, that seems to help. And I also try to keep everything really short. So as you can see, I'm a bullet person, and that's what I try to do, is I try to just do, you know, 2 or 3 sentences about each thing and then do that. Also having audio, video reflection of that as well can also help. Sometimes students would rather just listen to you talk about them. So that can be one thing. I try not to go to information overload in terms of the information like that I'm providing. So I try to really summarize that all in announcements, and then have opportunities for email. Like email is typically done for students. Students tend to initiate more of the email contact. Also within like discussion boards, I like to jump in and be a part of the discussion as well. That's also a good thing, is a part of that communication loop. So areas, strength, areas for that growth, and then just a place where I tell students that they can contact me by email if they need additional questions, or, you know, if they have a lot of questions. I always say to them, if you have more than like 1 or 2 questions, just let's set up a phone call or an ability to just call. So, and just kind of going back to that, I'll just kind of present that slide that has all of them. That's essentially what I've learned. So through being a instructor and also being a student, I've learned that these 4 key elements are really important, and just trying to figure out different ways to engage and motivate our students, I think, is really important. So I know I have like about 5 more minutes. So if you have any questions, please feel free. I'm going to just try to say that I've answered them. But please feel free to. Post any more questions if you have them in chat. And I will make sure I post in chat some of the tools that I mentioned. I mentioned Padlet, and I also mentioned Nearpod. I also mentioned Desmos. I also mentioned Flipgrid. And I mentioned Edpuzzle. Those are probably 5 of my favorite tools that I've used with online learning. So I'm just waiting to see if there's anybody else that has any questions in this last 5 minutes. Thank you so much to Hawks Learning for allowing me to have this opportunity to speak. It's been wonderful. I hope that you guys have learned something from this. And Faith, I'll just be waiting for anybody else if there's any other Q&A coming in.
Yeah, you're perfectly fine. And thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation. Well, if there are no more questions, then again, thank you, Dr. Schaefer, and thank you for all of you for attending today. If you're interested in the link to this presentation and the virtual classroom template, I'm going to post it in the chat now. And if you have any questions, direct them to marketing@hawkslearning.com, and I will post that in the chat so you can email them with any questions you have if you would like the link.
Oh, state the reference for Huang? Absolutely. I will make sure I'll navigate it to that right now. Yep, that was a new one that I really like their reference. So I'm gonna post that right there. It is. Oh, can't see the link. Yep, if you have, okay. So I'm gonna answer that for. Oh gosh.
I'll enable chat now, and I'm going to repost the email where they can direct any questions and if they need the link to, if that's what they're referring to, they can't see.
Yep.
They should be able to now.
All right, wonderful. Yes, so thank you, everybody. Have a good day. If you're in the Northeast like me, stay warm.
I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their day, and thank you again for attending. Are you referring to a link that the hostess, or are you asking me for one?
Nothing showing in the chat. Maybe they want that again. This one? Or if they're looking for the different tools, I can post those again too. Oh,
go ahead and email marketing for that. The email that I pasted there, if you can, just shoot them an email and ask for the recording, because it'll save off of this.
Yep. Let me go ahead and do that. See if this works.
I can't see.
Oh, everyone. There we go.
There we go.
I was posting it to you.
Oh, you're fine. I think I may have been doing the same thing. I don't know why I automatically did that, but should be working now. Do y'all see that?
Yep, you can email them part marketing. And there's just all the other references.
Perfect. Thank you for your patience. I think it was just automatically going to hosts.
Yep. I'll just show them for the references that I referenced throughout the presentation, if you want to see any of those. Yes, thank you for attending. Thank you.
right, well, it's about that time, so I'm going to go ahead and close out the Zoom. But again, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for attending. Everyone have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yes, take care. Bye.